Following the collapse of Roman authority in Western Europe, the Frankish kingdom emerged as an absolute geopolitical monopoly. By the early 6th century, under King Clovis I, the Merovingian dynasty had effectively consolidated control over nearly all of modern-day France and Germany. Clovis did not operate like a traditional tribal chieftain. He acted as an aggressive monopolist, executing a series of rapid territorial buyouts and hostile acquisitions to eliminate every competing military power in Gaul. But the legal framework that built this empire contained a fatal administrative flaw. Hard-coded into Frankish law was an inheritance system known as partible inheritance. This diagram illustrates the mechanical difference. In a system of primogeniture, the entire state infrastructure passes intact to a single eldest heir. The Merovingians, however, treated the kingdom as a private equity pool. By law, total state assets had to be divided into perfectly equal shares among all surviving male heirs. The mathematics of this law guaranteed systemic instability. With every generational transfer, the state automatically fractured. To reclaim a majority stake and re-centralize control, heirs had no choice but to wage war against their own siblings. The Merovingian state's core administrative code legally mandated its own destruction, guaranteeing a shareholder civil war with every succession cycle. When Clovis died in 511 AD, his estate was executed exactly according to this law. His 4 sons immediately carved his geographic monopoly into 4 distinct regional headquarters. This map shows the primary geographic subsidiaries that emerged. The territory was dominated by 3 massive blocks: Austrasia, Neustria, and Burgundy. These borders satisfied strict inheritance quotas, ignoring economic logic. They slashed directly through trade routes, severed supply lines, and arbitrarily split agricultural zones. Maintaining this fractured system created a massive capital drain. Instead of pooling resources, the Frankish economy had to fund multiple redundant royal courts, competing bureaucratic systems, and completely separate standing armies. Occasionally, the map was forced back together, but these reunifications were strictly the result of attrition. Centralization was only achieved when one king systematically murdered his brothers, uncles, and nephews. The defining military conflicts of the Merovingian era were rarely campaigns of foreign expansion. They were vicious, inward-facing corporate buyouts, executed entirely within the family bloodline. By the late 6th century, the geopolitical reality had severely deteriorated. The state was hopelessly locked in a cycle of fragmentation between the warring sub-kingdoms of Neustria and Austrasia, bleeding royal capital at an unsustainable rate. The central administrative anchors of this era were 2 rival queens, Fredegund of Neustria and Brunhilda of Austrasia. Historical records have long mischaracterized their 40-year conflict as an emotional, petty rivalry between jealous sisters-in-law. A structural analysis reveals them as highly competent proxy executives. The relentless mortality rate of adult male heirs, driven by the continuous succession wars, meant these regions operated as the true managers behind a revolving door of infant or politically compromised kings. Both women pursued the exact same policy objective: reverse the partible inheritance fracture, eliminate the rival subsidiary, and rebuild a centralized Frankish monopoly exclusively under their own bloodline. Operating within a legal framework designed to continuously divide power, Fredegund and Brunhilda recognized that absolute calculated ruthlessness was the only rational policy tool available to prevent total state collapse. Queen Fredegund's primary administrative mechanism was surgical, systemic assassination. She utilized targeted killings to aggressively prune rival branches of the Merovingian family tree. When Brunhilda's husband, King Sigebert I, mobilized troops to conquer Neustria, Fredegund dispatched assassins to eliminate him, instantly halting a hostile takeover that would have ended her subsidiary. She applied the same logic to insubordinate officials. The assassination of Bishop Praetextatus during Easter Mass functioned as the calculated termination of defiant middle management. Each execution functioned as a cold, documented administrative order, backed by the full weight of royal authority. Queen Brunhilda deployed a different counter-strategy in Austrasia. She focused on deep institutional control, aggressively maintaining Roman-style centralized taxation, managing logistical supply chains, and personally directing military campaigns. Fredegund specialized in hostile administrative terror to protect her assets, while Brunhilda specialized in bureaucratic centralization to consolidate hers. Their proxy war successfully kept the state machinery functioning for 4 decades. However, the sheer cost of constant retaliatory assassination completely hollowed out the royal family's actual manpower. The executive war reached its climax in 613 AD, when the system finally broke against Brunhilda. Now in her 70s, Queen Brunhilda was outmaneuvered and captured by King Clovis II, the surviving son of her late rival, Fredegund. Clovis ordered a highly public execution, tying the 70-year-old queen by her hair and limbs to an untamed horse to be torn apart. This spectacle was designed with systemic finality. Clovis was not merely executing an ant, he was publicly and violently severing a deeply entrenched 40-year-old bureaucratic network that answered only to her. While Clovis II is credited with finally reuniting the Frankish monopoly, he only possessed the infrastructure to do so because Fredegund and Brunhilda had spent their lives violently centralizing the administrative machinery. The proxy managers won the battle to save the state infrastructure, but in the process they exhausted the Merovingian executive board, leaving the entire corporation ripe for external capture. The multi-generational royal civil war produced one major unintended consequence. It ushered in the era of the res faineants, the do-nothing kings. The surviving Merovingian kings were reduced to mere ceremonial figureheads. Biologically exhausted by constant inbreeding and politically castrated by decades of regencies, they wielded no practical authority. With the kings trapped in this ceremonial vacuum, the day-to-day operations of the state were managed by a different set of hands. The power vacuum was rapidly filled by a specific class of aristocratic administrators, the mayor domus, or the mayors of the palace. Despite the title, the mayors were not domestic servants. Functionally, they operated as the state's chief operating officers. Their portfolio encompassed all critical state functions. They managed the royal treasury, distributed lucrative land grants, handled the military payroll, and oversaw tax collection across all the fractured territories. By controlling the ledgers, the logistics, and the treasury, the mayors effectively stripped the crown of its practical utility. Specific families of mayors, most notably the Pippinids, began quietly accumulating the actual hard equity of the state, while the remaining royals played at warfare. By leveraging their control over the Frankish currency, the mayors built vast private patronage networks that bypassed the royal family entirely. The definitive proof of this power shift occurred under Charles Martel. As mayor, he successfully ruled Francia for 4 years without even bothering to appoint a Merovingian king to the empty throne. While heavily armed royals spent generations fighting over a diminishing slice of the pie, the bureaucrats were quietly executing tasks in the background to absorb the entire bakery. The final administrative event occurred in 751 AD, when the mayor Pepin the Short officially deposes Childeric III, the last Merovingian king. The transition in 751 was the formalization of a silent, hostile takeover, liquidating the Merovingian monopoly and initiating the Carolingian dynasty. The Merovingian collapse demonstrates the consequences of structural failure. A single bug in the equity distribution mandated 2 centuries of civil war, ensuring the founders were eventually cannibalized by their own middle management.